Welcome to the next edition of our Foundation Speaker Series. My name is Elizabeth Rosales, and today I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Flora Pascarero. Flora has been in the broadcasting industry for many, many years, as she describes it, and is currently a co-host for a podcast called Chick to Chick, as well as the Senior Multimedia Specialist for penwatch.org. Welcome, Flora. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, can I ask exactly how long have you been in the broadcasting industry? And was that what you always wanted to do when you grew up?
I've been in broadcasting for a long, long time. And we're just going to leave it at that. Yeah, you know what? This is something that I always wanted to do. You know, you hear these stories all the time that so-and-so was born to play the piano or so-and-so was born to be a dancer. And I think in some respects, I was born to do this. My mom used to tell me stories when I was a little girl that I would walk around the house with a hairbrush in my hand, talking into the brush as though that was my microphone, and then I was reporting on the news. And I remember, being really young and being obsessed with the news and wanting to watch it and just being consumed with current events and looking at the people in the television. And I didn't understand how that all worked. I thought they were in the back of the television set. So I really was, I think in some respects, I think like this is what God wanted me to do. I don't think I really had a choice. And I even remember childhood conversations with my best friend that we were going to have a talk show together. And we talked about that like when we were 10 and 11 years old. So I always wanted to do this, and I knew this is what I wanted to do. And I was blessed in a lot of respects that I went to a high school that was set up more like a college campus, that we actually changed buildings to go from class to class, which is really unusual in a high school setting. And you couldn't just take classes at my high school, you had to sort of have a focus. And we actually had a television station and we had a newspaper. And so I got into the television part at taking classes like that and getting into broadcasting in high school. And then, of course, I went on to college and got into my career.
I see. Okay. So you kind of already knew early on that you wanted to do the TV route. You knew what part of the segment that you really had an interest for.
Yeah, I did. I mean, like I said, I knew it at a very, very young age. And then when I went to college, people who get into broadcasting, they have all different degrees. Some people get a degree in journalism. Some people get a degree in broadcasting. Some people get a degree in political science. I actually majored in speech communications because when you get into broadcasting, you can't really have an accent. People from different parts of the country have a Southern accent or, from Boston, they have an accent, or Philly. And I had a Pittsburgh accent.
Oh.
Yeah, I had a Pittsburgh accent. And I used to say things like yins guys and up air and sandwich. And I had all of those Pittsburghese things. And so I majored in speech communications because I wanted to clean up my speech. And I took a lot of public speaking classes because I knew that, as a broadcaster, that's what you were going to be doing. And so that's what I majored in. But again, as I said, people have all kinds of different majors who actually get into broadcasting.
Right. And so can I ask, how difficult is it to get into any particular part of, the broadcasting industry as a whole? As you said, there's many different facets. So how difficult is it to get into any particular avenue? Is it easier to start out at one level and work your way up, or what has been your experience with that?
Well, you know what? That's a great question. And people don't understand. It is a very, very competitive business, and it's very difficult to get into. The way the television market works is there are about 220 television markets across the country, and it's based on population. So New York is the number one television market in the country. It's based on the population, and it goes all the way down to 220. So I want you to think about that. There's only 220 markets. And then in those 220 markets, you only have maybe 3 or 4 television stations, the ABC, the Fox, CBS, and NBC. So you don't have, it's not like, you want to be an accountant, for instance. And every business needs an accountant. And you might have 1,000 job opportunities in one city, and here you don't, because there are only so many markets and then only so many stations in each market. So it's very competitive. And what you really need to do is you need to start in a smaller television market and then work your way up. So I started in Clarksburg, West Virginia, which was market 180. 180. It was very, very small. And when you start at that level, you do everything. So I was the photographer, I was the editor, I was the producer, I was the anchor, I was the reporter. And the funny thing is on the weekends, I was it. I was the entire weekend crew. So I would come in at 8 o'clock in the morning. I would go out and videotape stories. I would come back and edit them. Then I would write the entire newscast. And here's the funny part. When we would actually go on the air at 6 o'clock, I would sit in one seat and do the news. Then we would take a commercial break, and I was standing in front of the weather map and I was doing the weather.
Oh my goodness.
And then we would take a commercial break and I was over there doing sports. And I was getting teams wrong and scores wrong and mispronouncing players' names. And, I would go home at night and I would cry and I'm an idiot. I said his name wrong. And I remember the one day I couldn't see the forecast. I didn't bring the piece of paper in my hand because we didn't have computers back then. It was all on paper. And I didn't bring the paper with me. And it was like 50 degrees outside. And I said something like, it's currently 80 degrees and we're going to,
oh no.
I couldn't see, and I went home at night and I bawled my eyes out and I'm like, I'm never going to work in this business ever again. And I'm terrible. And,
Oh, that's so disheartening.
There's a beauty in starting at a small market. I know kids come out of college and they want to start right at the top. They want to start in New York, or they want to start in Philly, or they want to start in LA. And I honestly would absolutely advise against that because you're going to make mistakes. And that's how you learn. And it's better that you make those mistakes at a smaller level, like at a market 180 in Clarksburg, West Virginia, because you're really not ruining your career. You're learning from your mistakes at that level. You don't want to make those mistakes in New York or Philly or anywhere else where all of a sudden it's going to it's going to become a viral moment, and that's another thing. We didn't have all of that stuff when I started in the business. My son always likes to say back then, I think he thinks I was born in a cave, but we didn't have social media. We didn't have all of this stuff. So when you made a mistake, it was like you made a mistake and you moved on and the person forgot about it. But now, you make a mistake and it turns viral and then you got to live with this my advice is start smaller, cut your teeth, learn the business, and then work your way up, which is what I ended up doing.
Very, very good advice. Now, if you don't mind me asking, so, you went through a lot of anxious moments and, mix-ups and things like that. Did you ever get to a point where you just wanted to give up? And if you did, how did you overcome that? How did you overcome your fear or your nervousness or, what if I mess up?
Another great question. I didn't give up. I am really a stubborn person. I'm very, very stubborn. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I have a really hard head. I'm Italian and I'm Calabrese. And one of the things they say about people from Calabria is they have capatost, a hard head. And I have a hard head. When I messed up, that gave me the boost to say, no, you're going to get it right the next time. And trust me, I had plenty of people who say to me, don't do it. You're not going to make it in this business. I remember when I was in college, in one of my speech classes, they brought in a broadcaster from the Pittsburgh television market to talk to the class. And I went up to this woman after the class was over and I said, I really want to do this. And can you give me any advice and blah, blah, blah. And she looked me in the eye and she said, you know what my advice is? She goes, I wouldn't do this if I were you. She said, you don't have the look. You don't have the look. Mm-hmm. And so, I had big hair back then and, the whole college mess. Right. I went back to my dorm room and I sobbed and I sobbed. And then I thought, you know what? Mm-hmm. I'm going to prove her wrong. Mm-hmm. So when people said to me, no, you can't, my response was, oh, yes, I can. So all of those mistakes and all of those people along the way, and even when I was actually in the business and tried to apply, which is what you do, then I would apply for jobs in a bigger television market. I had plenty of people saying to me, you should get out of the business. Mm-hmm. I don't think this is the right thing for you. I don't think this is the right fit. And again, all that did was galvanize me to say, oh, you're not, oh, no. You picked the wrong one. You're not going to tell me I can't do this and I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah. But you got to have thick skin. You're going to get some criticism, right? You're going to have some negativity. So if anything, probably a skill maybe to develop is learning to have tough skin. Do you think that there are any other skills or characteristics that you need to be in that sort of industry?
Yeah, thick skin is so important. When you're younger, you lack confidence. And I lacked confidence. So every negative thing that anybody ever said to me, I took to heart. And, it devastated me. And I would cry and I was so upset about it. But the older you get, there's wisdom that comes along with that. And you get to a point where you say, you know what, this is not a popularity contest. Mm-hmm. Some people are going to like me and some people aren't going to like me. And it's just the same way you watch a television show. Some people love that particular show and some people think it's boring. And you have to take it, with a grain of salt. And so now when people criticize me, I just say, thank you for your feedback. I love hearing, and some of it might be valid. And you have to have an open mind to say, what, maybe they were right about that. So I take it in a different vein now. Which I didn't do when I was in my 20s, because again, and that's normal. You just don't have that confidence. And with experience, you get more confident and you look at things differently and you have an open mind and you do come to that realization that, as I said, not everybody's going to like you and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so what are some classes or some courses or degrees that you think would be helpful? Now, as we mentioned earlier, there's obviously different avenues you can pursue, but generally, what would be some training or classes or degrees that people should pursue?
Sure. So, I was on air in broadcasting, but there's so many other jobs. You don't have to just be an anchor or a reporter. You can be a producer. You can be a writer. You can be a videographer. You can be an editor. And now the industry has changed so much since when I started. I mean, social media is so important. And that was not a factor before. So when you say what kind of classes, it really depends on what you want to do. If you're getting into broadcasting and you want to be on air and you want to be a reporter, public speaking is so important. Speech classes, writing, those classes are also important. If you want to be a videographer, well, then of course you're going to take classes with videography and photography. But everybody really has to be social media savvy right now. When I started, you only had to worry about getting your story on the air at 6 o'clock. There were basically 3 newscasts every day, 3 or 4. There was something in the morning, noon, 6, and 11, and that was it. And now, not only do you have a newscast in the morning and at noon, but some people have a 4 o'clock and a 5 o'clock and a 6 o'clock and a 7 o'clock and a 10 o'clock and an 11 o'clock. But all of that's irrelevant. Your deadline these days, instead of 6 o'clock, it's 5 minutes from now. I mean, if you're out on a story, you've got to get that on the website ASAP. You've got to get it on social media ASAP because people don't want to wait anymore. You know, if they're out somewhere and traffic is backed up for miles, they get on their phone. They get on their phone because they want to know what's going on
right away.
And you have to be really cognizant of that. And you have to realize that if they don't get that information immediately, you're losing them and they're going to somebody else's website.
Right. Yeah.
So
keep their interest.
Yeah, it's really changed. Everything has changed.
Yeah. So why don't you speak to that a little bit? You know, I mentioned earlier you started out, you know, as a news anchor, and now you're in the podcast industry. You know, how have you noticed the broadcasting industry as a whole change? And leading into that, how did you end up getting into podcasting?
Sure. Well, you know, I touched on that a little bit there, how much the industry has changed with the advent of the internet and websites and social media, and you really have to be on your game. I don't want to say this, and it's in some ways, the news business is becoming irrelevant. And I don't mean to sound negative when I say that, but it's kind of what I had said before. Before, people didn't have a choice. They had to wait until 6 o'clock to get the news. You know, they had to wait until 10 o'clock or whatever. They had to wait. And now you don't have to wait anymore. And people just get right on their phone. I mean, the number one reason people watch the news is to get the weather. You don't have to do that anymore. You know, you've got all these apps available. You have all this stuff on your phone. So in some regards, local broadcasting is kind of becoming irrelevant, that people just don't want to wait anymore. So they have to change, they have to evolve and realize, okay, we've got to put our emphasis here and get the story out on social. We've got to get the story out on our website. We've got to have a streaming service so that you stay relevant. And you have to change with the times. And of course, you know, COVID has changed everything, and it's even changed the broadcasting industry. And now you said, you know, I'm in podcasting. My broadcasting career came to an end about 3 or 4 years ago. And I was trying to figure out what's next. What was next? What did I want to do? And this may sound weird to you. I'm kind of a shy person. And I never got into broadcasting because I wanted to be on TV. I did it because I like information. I like learning things, and I like new things. And that's why I did it. And at that time, you know, podcasts were it was the new and upcoming thing. And I felt like that was a way that I could continue to do what I love, and do interviews and talk about things that I love, do it in a more in-depth way. And I'm kind of proud of the podcast, because when we started doing this podcast, most podcasts were audio only. And we were cutting edge because we decided we're not just going to do audio, we're going to do video too. So we were cutting edge in that respect. And now you see a lot of audio podcasts. And so that was really kind of cool. And our podcast continues to evolve, because first we started out on just some podcast audio channels, and then we brought in the video element, and now we're all over social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And now we have, we work with a local television station. We're on Fox 43, and this is really kind of cool. And this all just happened within the last month. There's a channel called the DBNA Television Network, and it is a channel that streams podcasts all day, 24 hours a day. And it's on Roku, Amazon Fire, and it's going to be on Apple TV pretty soon. So our podcast is now on this streaming channel every single day at noon. So it's like, you know, I was just talking to somebody 5 minutes before I got on this Zoom, and they said, you know, everybody asked me, what's my business plan? What's my business plan? And I said, why do you have to have a business plan?
Yeah.
Why? Sometimes when you have a plan, you get so locked into it that if you're not meeting your own expectations in that plan, you're going to feel like you're failing. I said, we didn't have a business plan for the podcast, and we still don't have a plan. Our plan is to seize every day and seize every opportunity that comes our way, and to change and evolve depending on what's going on. And the podcast had to change and evolve during COVID. We taped in person before, and then when COVID hit, we had to do our podcast via Zoom and change. Right. And I think sometimes, people have these plans. What's your plan? What's your game plan? I don't know.
Take it as it comes, right? And learn to adapt and adjust.
To pivot. Yes. I think that word is the most overused word in the English vocabulary. But you have to pivot. Right. And if an opportunity comes along, when this guy called me and he says, I'm with the DB&A television network and we want your podcast. And I'm like, what? Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. And it just happened that quickly. So it's exciting. And there's so many different opportunities out there. And you have to believe in yourself, and you have to have confidence in yourself, and you have to be willing to change and pivot and do whatever, when that call comes in, just go, okay, all right, I'll try it.
Yeah. So now switching over to the podcasting, how do you prepare for podcasting? What does it look like when you're preparing to deliver your content?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my co-host, Carrie, we have been friends for, 17 years. I don't even know. Long time. And it's really a natural fit. When you do something like this with somebody else, you have to have chemistry. You just do. You can't fake it. You can't make it up. You can't just put two people together. Because I know her so well, and because we have been friends for so long, she will end my sentences, and I end her sentences. And there's this whole level of respect between the two of us, which I just absolutely love. I know everything about her on a personal and a professional level, and she knows everything about me. And when we do our podcast, though, I know what I can say and when I'm not going to cross the line to make her uncomfortable. And she's the same way with me. And a lot of the podcasts that we do are based on our life. Our podcast is Chick to Chick, and of course we're geared towards women, but we talk about everything. And we'll be having a conversation about something, and I'll look at her and I'll go, that's a podcast. And so we will, seriously, we have a list of about 300 ideas for podcasts that we want to do. So we will sit down and we map it out, and we say, hey, what are we going to do? What month is it? Is there a particular thing that we want to come up with? Is there a certain, October is usually about breast cancer. Right. We want to do something on breast cancer. Something fun that we did back in November is we renamed November and we called it Movember. And every week we did something about men and focused on a male issue, because even though our audience is women, stuff that affects men affects women. Right. And so it was great. And we just have this synergy between us. And, if she doesn't want to do a certain topic, then we just don't do it. But we're kind of a well-oiled machine now. We figure out what our topics are going to be. We, figure out and reach out to who we think would be a good guest. And then we just, we get together and we tape them. In fact, we're going to be taping next Monday. And we do a lot of them ahead of time too, because it's a lot of work. Our podcasts are 12 to 15 minutes, and it's a lot of work to edit the audio version and then edit the video version. And we're sitting together, and then we connect with our guests via Zoom, and all of this has to be edited. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. And then we promote the podcast. But I would say that a good deal of our podcasts are just based on life. and what's going on in our lives. You know, the one podcast we did, I laugh about this all the time, is that my son called me and he says, "Mom, I'm going to get a dog." I'm like, "You're a college student. What do you mean you're going to get a dog?" I want to get a dog. I'm like, "You got to feed the dog. You got to do this." And he's like, "I'm getting a dog." So he goes to the shelter and he calls me. And in fact, I was with Carrie and he's like, "Mom, I got this dog." And I'm like, "Ugh." And I'm saying to Carrie, "I'm going to kill him." So after he got the dog, now Carrie has 2 dogs. He says to Carrie, "What do I do about this? And what do I do about that? And does Tilly need a vaccine?" And I said, "See, son, this is what I was talking about. You have to do your homework before you just go out and do something like this." And so I looked at Carrie and she goes, "I know what you're thinking. This is a podcast." And so we did a podcast called Get the Doggone Facts. You know? And it was inspired by my knucklehead son, who went out and got the dog and then had all these questions. "I don't know what I'm doing." And blah, 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 blah. So that was a podcast, and that was something that was inspired, by life. And another podcast that we just recently did, and I just love this, and I think everybody should do this. We did a podcast called Preserving Your Family History. Everybody has history in their family, and everybody's now doing all of these DNA things and Ancestry.com and whatnot. About 12 years ago, my parents are Italian immigrants, and they had like these incredible stories to tell, incredible stories. And so I sat down with both of them and I interviewed them, and I captured it all on videotape.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I have this history, and then I transferred it to a DVD, and my dad talked about his brothers and this and that, and all my cousins wanted it. And so I have this history now. I have my family history, and that inspired a podcast that we did right before Christmas. Use the holiday now to preserve your family history. Take the time, talk to your grandparents, talk to your parents, find out what the history is so that it's not lost. Especially in light of what happened last year with COVID, that families can't get together. Don't waste your time. And the timeliness of what I did with my parents was, I had talked about doing that for so long. And then I finally sat down and we did it the one year. It was 2010 at Thanksgiving. My dad then passed away unexpectedly 2 years later. And so don't waste your time, do it. And that inspired a podcast. So it's real life. And we feel like if it's happening to us, we're just normal people. And if these things are affecting us, it's affecting other people. And it seems to resonate very well with our audience. And, they enjoy the fact that it's just 2 chicks hanging out, talking.
That's awesome. That is amazing. Thank you so much for your insights. Do you have any last minute advice or important life lessons that you've learned along the way?
I think it's kind of some of the things that I've already touched on. If you want to do something, do it. If you have a passion for something, do it. Don't let somebody tell you can't do something. Follow your dreams. You can do anything you want. There's so many opportunities because the world has changed so much and people are doing things from home, and the internet has become so important, and social media. There's so many different opportunities, but don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you learn from your mistakes. Don't be afraid to take criticism. Criticism helps you grow. It helps you evolve, and it helps you get better. Don't be afraid to pivot and maybe not follow that plan that you thought things were going to work out this way and now they're going that way. Just be open-minded, have an open heart, and love what you're doing. Because if you don't love what you're doing, you're not going to want to do it, and you're not going to do it well.
Right.
Make sure you have a passion and a love and a drive for whatever you're doing.
Wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Flora. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you for all your insights. It's been a pleasure spending this time with you, and I thank you for sharing with us what the broadcasting industry has been like for you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's been a great pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much.
Finally, if you'd like to connect with Flora directly, her contact information will follow at the conclusion of this interview. I know she would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching.